When Jesus heard that his friend Lazarus was sick, he waited 2 days before going to Bethany. When the message about his friend came, he was across the Jordan River in an area where John the Baptist had been baptizing about 3 years earlier. Jesus went there because the Jews had tried to arrest him the last time he was in Jerusalem. Many ordinary people, however, came to him there as they had come to hear John. When they heard Jesus, many believed that Jesus was the Messiah John had announced. But the news from Mary and Martha interrupted Jesus' work. The walk from Perea to Bethany took 2 days. Jesus and his disciples walked along the road that crossed the Jordan and went through Jericho. Jesus had visited the house of Mary and Martha many times before. The welcome was always overwhelming. The day Jesus arrived this time was a day of sorrow. Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, was dead. While Jesus was still a long way off, Martha ran toward him. In her grief, she told Jesus that if he had been there, her brother would not have died. Jesus reassured her by promising that her brother would rise again. Martha trusted that Lazarus would rise again on the last day, but Jesus reminded her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die." It was 4 days since Lazarus had died. What happened next can never be forgotten. With a voice so loud that it seemed everyone in Bethany and maybe even Jerusalem could hear him, Jesus called, "Lazarus, come out!" And the dead man obeyed. If this was a trip to the stronghold of Jesus' enemies in Judea, they could not put him to death. Instead, Jesus brought life and resurrection, joy and hope. What a way to start this final walk with Jesus. If we had been there, we would have talked for days about how we saw Lazarus standing in the dark entrance of the tomb, still wrapped in strips of linen used to bury him. Jesus called him back to life. The words of comfort Jesus spoke to Mary about being the resurrection and the life powerfully and dramatically became more than just words. They were true because Jesus stood behind them. For him, the death of Lazarus was no more than a sleep from which he could awaken his friend. Reports of the miracle came to the Pharisees, who quickly called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. The Jewish High Council resolved to kill Jesus because he was performing too many miraculous signs. Isn't it strange that such a life-giving power should create a desire for death? In that special meeting of the Jewish Council, Caiaphas, the high priest, said, "You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish." He was willing to sacrifice Jesus so that he and others could continue as leaders of the Jews. The enemies of Jesus reasoned that his growing popularity would take people away from the Jewish traditions and temple. Ironically, what Caiaphas meant was not what God meant. God's long-awaited plan was about to unfold. One man would die for the people so that the whole nation would not perish. Jesus would die so that every Jew and every Gentile would not perish, but have eternal life. From the death of Jesus would come life and resurrection. That was something Caiaphas could not understand. He was blinded by unbelief.